I'm a fan of the column, and I'm curious, what was the genesis? How did it come about? And what was the intent? What were you hoping to accomplish through it?
You know, I've been a reporter at the New York Times for a long time. I'm a native New Yorker, though. I spent the past 10 years in Washington, and the Times invited me back to write a column, and I thought writing about the working life in New York City would be a really rich, fascinating terrain. I really want to focus on the stories of people and what it's like out there. We have a recovery. Some would say it's a non-recovery recovery from the Great Recession. And we have an economy that is in a lot of flux. And I wanted to really chronicle that through the lives of ordinary people.
And the thing that I think connects with this column to others is people bombarded by data, important information showing the gap between have and have-nots and how the situation and the definition of poverty is changing and the numbers are getting bigger. But you've managed to put a human face on a lot of it. And I want to go through, if I could, some of the stories and talk about these people. And the first one was a neighbor of yours in Staten Island, Marianna Savino. Talk about her story, because it mimics a lot of others. She's in a different place in her life right now than she was not too long ago.
A different place, a far different place than she ever imagined. She was a successful corporate manager, someone who had a six-figure salary, a very comfortable life, who got laid off in 2009 and struggled, first to get her way back into the corporate world. She did find another job, but was laid off again, and ended up finding a job as a teaching assistant, a paraprofessional, making, you know, something on the order of $28,000 a year. A huge dive in income from where she was. She said, you know, she describes herself and other people like her as discarded people. And I think there's a lot of hurt, a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment from people who felt like they were at the top of their professional game. And she spent years looking. And you know, the truth is that, you know, the unemployment rate, particularly for older workers, is quite high, and it's quite challenging for them.
And her challenge echoed when her spouse also ran into some of the same problems. And to that end, you focused on two brothers in Queens on two different ends of the economic spectrum. But it shows what we're hearing so often out there, where within the family, where people who couldn't identify with poor or working poor now know someone who fits that description, and the two brothers you profile were a perfect example.
And this column was about an engineer who had a brother who had really struggled and was just barely making it. And it was about their relationship and about the complexities of having, you know, two brothers on different sides of this economic divide.
On a national level, whether it's unemployment insurance, whether it's food stamps, or even the minimum wage, this is also on a national policy level. And you focused on workers in a casino who are trying to get to the point of a living wage. And I think the article articulated just how hard it is to get by on minimum wage or even something approaching, especially in the metropolitan area.
I think that's right. And I think it's obviously, it's a conversation that we're having in the city, particularly with the new mayor who brought some of these issues right to the forefront. But it is really a national conversation, and there have been, you know, demonstrations and protests about increasing the minimum wage. The president has been urging, calling for it. There are obviously folks who are opposed to it. This column was about what happens when your life is transformed because you end up with a living wage. And these were casino workers, you know, cooks, you know, actually like slot machine workers, parking attendants, who literally saw their salaries double overnight, going from, you know, $20,000 a year to $40,000 a year. And at the end of a 3-year contract, they will be earning $60,000 a year. Now, in a city that, you know, prides itself on its appeal to millionaires and billionaires, that might not seem like much, but it is transformative for those workers.
And you also highlight stories where even though people go through challenges at the end, there is some light at the tunnel. And if you could, talk a little bit about Gregory Brandon, who that final paragraph was the payoff here. He struggled in his life, but he does see a better day now than he did a couple days back.
You know, one of the challenges of writing a column like this is keeping it new, keeping it fresh, finding new ways of telling a story, keeping people engaged. And I really wanted to kind of tell the story of someone searching for work. And I spent some time in one of the city's Workforce One offices. And, you know, truly as a reporter, sometimes you don't know what you're going to find. And I bumped into a guy by the name of Gregory Brandon, a cook, who had been, you know, looking for steady work since August, and basically spent a couple of hours with him as he went through an interview process, and then for the column recreated his day, that day and the night before, of going to find work. And he was lucky, and we were lucky on that day he did find a job.
You know, Rachel, I've done some work with some of the food shelters around here and the food insecure population, and they'll say to me after a while, you know, the real story is, come see who walks to the back door that doesn't want to come through the front door, and you see professionals, you see people who can't make it to pay the mortgage but also pay to put food on the table, and they're embarrassed where they are. And the biggest challenge for me is getting these people to put their name to their lives because of whether embarrassment or whatever else. And because of that, I think that's part of our challenge here. We can give data, you actually put some faces to it, but have you run into that problem too, where I think people's perception of who fits poverty is different in reality than that perception? How hard has it been for these people to be willing to come forward?
Well, I mean, the truth is, if you look at the poverty numbers, if you look at the economic numbers around this city, hardship during this recovery period from this recession is widespread, and it's not simply you know, folks on the margins. It's people like Marianna Savino, professionals who have lost their place, who are struggling to find a way back, or struggling to find a way to make new lives with less. And it's one of the challenges of doing a column like this. My next column is about adjunct professors who are cobbling together a living, you know, a course at this college, a course here, a course there, making less than $30,000 a year. And some of them, it was hard to persuade them to put their face to their concerns. These are folks with PhDs who desperately want to have you know, the Holy Grail, a tenure track position at a university.
Well, I can't tell folks strongly enough to read these stories, because it's human stories, which I think is sometimes the hardest part to have when you're having these conversations. And they can check out the column Monday in the Times, right, Rachel?
That's right, and I really hope that folks who are watching, in addition to reading, will reach out. You know, I'm always looking for readers to share their stories, and I really hope that this column won't be something that people just read, but it will inspire a conversation about where we are in New York City. And we've put some of that contact information on the screen here if folks do want to reach out. Rachel, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Thank you.